for this afternoon. Many of you might know Dr. Holmes Brothers. She serves as the Director of Program Outreach and Engagement for the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. She oversees program development and strategic engagement for the state's historic sites, museums, parks, arts, and environmental resources. A respected cultural leader, Dr. Brothers has curated exhibitions that highlight African American art and the artists of the African diaspora, elevating narratives that center on creativity, history, and visual cultural art within institutional spaces. And you can see that she is definitely in the right place today. Previously, Dr. Brothers was the first person of color, say that again, she was the first person of color in senior leadership as Deputy Director of the North Carolina Arts Council. Yes, when she led transformative initiatives advancing arts for all people, expanding equitable funding practices and strengthening statewide community partnerships. Her leadership has consistently focused on amplifying underrepresented voices and fostering cross-sector collaboration that connects arts, history, and public life. A native of Fayetteville, North Carolina, and a proud graduate of V.E.E. Smith High School, Dr. Brothers holds a Bachelor of Arts in Art from Hampton University and an MS in Sports Management from West Virginia University and a PhD in Educational Management from Hampton University, along with multiple certifications in grief support, historic preservation, curating, and nonprofit management. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to turn the mic over to none other than Dr. Tamara Brothers Holmes. I mean, when she was a little girl, so I'm going to always be Tamara Holmes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's true that she's known me for a long time. I even used to babysit her nieces, so we were catching up yesterday. And I'm always happy to come back home and see so many familiar faces in the audience. So thank you so much.
Oh, okay.
Testing. Is it on?
Yes, turn that up.
Is it working?
The volume. Testing, 1, 2. Testing. Testing, 1, 2. Testing.
There you go.
Testing, okay. So as I mentioned, it's so exciting to be here with you today, and thank you so much for taking time out of your busy days to be here with us. I'm excited to have us joined by the wonderful artists Charlie Palmer and Woodrow Nash, who is streaming in with us today, and I'll give you their brief bios. So over 30 years and counting, Charlie Palmer's art speaks of itself. Literally, Palmer's paintbrush is as a griot. In every painting, he bears witness of African ancestry and contemporary experiences, rhythmic, visual stories that shifts what each viewer believes to see, should one dare to look deeply. Palmer has an innate awareness of documenting the intricacies of Blackness with such depth, patterns, symbols, and textures, it is easy to forget that he begins with a blank canvas. The ways in which he applies acrylic is somewhat its own aesthetic that transcends where one's thoughts begins and ends. So please let's welcome Charlie Palmer.
Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you.
And then, like I mentioned, we have streaming in live from Ohio, I believe, Woodrow Nash. You can see him on the screen here. Woodrow Nash builds a sense of mystery and charisma into each of his sculptures. And Fayetteville State actually has 2 life-size sculptures and their personal collection, university collection. Through his pieces, Nash achieves his goal of integrating expression, complex symbolism, and sophisticated aesthetics to yield striking embodiments of the human soul and sensuality. Certain creative individuals seem to know what they want to do with their lives from the moment they are cognizant. For others, it is fascinating, intellectual, and emotional journey with adventure, phenomenal discovery, and a labor of love. Please let's welcome Mr. Nash, who's visiting with us.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Again, today we have the privilege of hearing from two extraordinary artists whose work not only reflects Black life, but shapes how it is seen, understood, and remembered. Your works remind us that art is not just visual. It is historical, emotional, and deeply transformative. So let's begin with your journeys. Each artist has a starting point, right? But not every artist becomes a cultural voice, as the two of you have become. So Charlie and Woodrow, can you take us back to the moment you realized your work had the power to influence not just audiences, but culture itself? Take time.
I think Woodrow should go first.
Well, my journey began years ago, and I wanted to make a statement about Black culture. And I had always seen these primitive sculptures from Africa, the woodcuts and the stone stuff. And I wanted to make a statement about this African American culture as opposed to the African from the continent. I drew from what was happening in Paris during the 18th century with their Art Nouveau period. And I combined that with my ancestry, which is steeped in African tradition. I combined the two techniques, and I coined the phrase, I called it African Nouveau. I wanted to emphasize on the sensuousness and the lines and the feelings of African American people, not the downtrodden, but the regalness that we portrayed instead of the downtrodden, subjected, cotton picking types of situations that we were subjected to. And through this, I came up with these very regal looking images that I portray in my work. And it's influenced a lot of people over the years. And that was the more or less the stepping off point that I decided to start from. And it's just been a struggle over the years. I didn't want to fit into that whole stereotype about the starving artist. And so I just started doing these trade shows, African trade shows, and African American. And through it all, I gained the confidence of a lot of dealers and galleries, and the work is now self-perpetuating. And it's just a lot of work for me because it has taken a life of its own, so to speak. And I'm constantly trying to come up with new ideas and innovations to just create a feeling of regalness in our particular culture. Now, over the years, I've been involved in this over 20-some odd years. And it's still a challenge to create the images, and it's more or less a labor of love. You know, I kind of like just, I don't write anything down or draw anything, it kind of like just flows from within. I'm like a vessel. And the work just speaks for itself. And that's all I can say about the beginning of what I'm doing.
Thank you, sir. I'm just gonna say what he just said, same thing. Because you know what he's saying, I absolutely and totally like agree. When looking at Nash's work, this mic is not working. When I look at, is this one working? All right. When I look at Nash's work, I feel all those things, and I feel inspired, and I feel empowered, and so it's an absolute honor. I'm sorry we can't like necessarily share the stage, but I have a love for us, and I have a love for artists that are expressing the love for us, and that what you will see in a lot of my work is that absolute total commitment to love, right? I believe in us, I'm inspired by us, you all are my reason to continue, and especially Black youth, and like what can I do to elevate and inspire them? You know, so I'm always telling a story, and the story is about our power, our glory, our strength, that we've come through so much and we continue to be faced with challenges, but in the end, we always succeed. You know, it's like watching the administration and what's going on these days, we step back and we like, y'all figure this one out, because we've been there to help you so many times in the past, and what have we gotten for it? And so it's time to do some self-care. And when I say self-care, I'm not saying that's individual care, I'm talking about community care for our own. And I hope that that's kind of what you're gonna see in the work that I do. When you describe it, it's like, that seems like such a responsibility. And so I personally have never taken on that responsibility. I have just tried to show love, and hopefully in that people are getting the understanding that I believe in us.
And I think your work certainly carries that history and that identity, as well as truth. And as we think about truth, acting as that foundation of overall knowledge that you're sharing through your individual mediums of art. How do you balance personal expression with what can feel like a broader responsibility, like you just mentioned, to represent culture, community, and legacy? So we're gonna take that responsibility just a bit further.
Okay. Should I go first, or you want to do this one?
Well, I didn't quite hear the question.
Okay.
How do you balance personal expression with what can feel like a broader responsibility to represent culture, community, and legacy?
I can't hear.
Can you hear me now? Testing, can you hear me?
Vaguely.
Okay, I'll try it again. How do you balance personal expression?
There's a train.
How do you balance personal expression with what can feel like a broader responsibility to represent culture, community, and legacy?
There's a train outside.
Do you want to go ahead, Charlie? Then I can
Right.
repeat it.
You can hear me, right?
No.
Right. I'll take this mic. It's working like that. You know, first of all, when it comes to the responsibility of an artist, I again have not taken on that responsibility of what I'm supposed to, because I think it's unfair when you look at artists in general, in particular white artists, and they don't carry any responsibility to tell a story about their I was gonna say struggle, there you go. What they're dealing with. And so I think that as an artist, we should express whatever in our soul, in our spirit. So as a black artist, when I look at, in general, it's like we're everything. We're an amalgamation, we're a combination of abstract, still lifes, landscapes and everything. And that's not necessarily representing blackness. And I don't think it should be our responsibility, but it's my personal responsibility. I've taken on that responsibility for myself. And so that becomes really important. But like when I think about my legacy is in the mentoring that I've done with others. If they go out there and they don't have to mention my name. If I know it's any way I have affected them or inspired them, that's my legacy. Or my legacy is the children books that I've done, because they always focus on our beautiful black children. And so if that's what I'm known for when I'm gone, I would be fine with that. When I've said and created whatever works I've created, that is the extent of my expression. And then I'm really open to however anyone chooses to interpret that. I hope they see love. I hope they see, maybe at times concern, but just strong belief in who we are. And that's kind of like my position. So it's wonderful because I have such a love for us, and I keep saying that you'll see it and you'll understand it, but the intentionality is to express myself as much as possible. And that's what you're going to see through the work that I do. Does that make sense?
Okay. Well, art to me is the original form of communication. And as an artist, when I'm creating, I'm revealing pieces of myself in certain forms or whatever. And I'm not that much of an activist. What I try to create and say in my work is, what I try to convey is a feeling, a mood. But somehow the world around me is making me make suggestions about the postures and the stances and the defiance in the poses in my work. And I think that that's necessary because a lot of times during the WPA and earlier times, a lot of our images were sort of like, to me, although aesthetically beautiful, they were downtrodden. And I'm not trying to convey that kind of a message in the work that I create. I want to create hope for the future, for us as a people.
Thank you, and I certainly appreciate the intention that both of you take in your artwork and how you go about doing this work, and it certainly naturally brings us to spaces where art is and where it isn't seen. So let's look about underrepresentation and overall access. We know that Black artists have historically been underrepresented in museum collections, galleries, and major institutions. From your perspective, what has that reality looked like throughout your careers?
I'm aware as an artist that I've made sacrifices, and because I've made certain choices. Who will I work with? And a good example is Danny Jenkins. It's a friendship, watercolor, fine art out of Memphis, Tennessee. It's a friendship, it's a trust, it is let's do this together, as opposed to, I've always been opposed to making someone else rich in my expense. Like what people don't understand, typically in an art situation, whether it's a gallery or whatever, the artist is only gonna get 50% of all sales, right? And that means that whoever's representing me gets half of that. I'd rather give it to us, even if we don't have necessarily access to the museums. We do have access to one another, and so I've been very intentional about trying to work out things and knowing that in the end, the ancestors and my God has got me. And so I don't have to worry, and I will not worry Okay, that's not true. I do worry. But at the same time, I let go of it. It's let go and let God. And God reveals himself, himself in so many different ways that I know, like, I always say, like, you know, let go and let God, but I also say my God has a sense of humor. Because every time I start to panic, a check shows up or an opportunity shows up. And it's like, but we're talking about 40-something years of that. And like wondering when the next check is gonna come and starting to panic, and boom, there it is. You know, so it's like, I know that if I had made the choice of letting others represent me, I would probably have more money. But would I feel as good as I do about what we've done together? And that's how I feel.
You know, I had a chance to visit an art show last summer, and it was your typical art in the park situation, and it was represented by 3 or 4 black artists. And it reminded me of my earlier days trying to sell art, black art, in a white community. And we were often looked upon as exotics. They were curious about our work, but they didn't know if they wanted to have it represented in their homes. And so that's a task that a lot of artists have to deal with. It is being true to themselves and saying what they want to say, or designing their work to fit into another type of culture. And if you're true to yourself, you're not going to bend that way, because, I mean, I have a number of galleries representing me now, not so many white galleries, but they're black galleries. And that's my mainstay. Those are the people that I'm communicating to. And so, yes, we're underrepresented in the shows. I go down to Art Basel or Sofa Show in Chicago, and there's not a lot of our faces there. I was asked once at Sofa Show where the closet was. They didn't know that I was one of the artists participating in the show. They thought I was one of the janitors. And so, you know, we're faced with that particular struggle, but we just have to be aware of it, and I feel press forward and believe in ourselves.
And I think a good example of when you mentioned bringing the artwork into the homes, I'm not sure if people have seen that HBO show and Just Like That, and there's a character on there, black female, who was very prominent in her field, but she was also an art collector. So a lot of prominent black artists were shown on the show and was introduced to a lot of people that might not have otherwise thought to look at black art, and then those that it was a reminder to others that we don't simply exist in this space, we thrive in this space as well. So thank you to you both. And what advice would you give to emerging black artists navigating these systems today?
What was the question?
What advice would you give to emerging black artists in navigating this system today?
Well, a young artist, in my area where I'm at in Ohio and Akron, they formed a coalition of black artists, and they're all young, and they're not aware out there. They consider themselves as local artists, and that's a mistake that I made early on in my career. And I was trying to convey to them, you know, don't limit yourself to the local economy. You want to be on a national stage, and in order to do that, you have to seek out these venues where we are represented and people seek you out. And instead of trying to, you know, like break into a market that's not fully appreciating your talent. So we just have to be strong enough and wise enough to use a different approach.
Learn your craft. Master your craft. It's not enough to be good enough. and some young artists don't know they're only good enough. So I often ask young artists, why are you in the business? Because some of them are there just to make a lot of money. And so if that's the case, you're gonna compromise what you're doing creatively. And so it's like, I always wanna know, why are you doing it? Because I can tell you, like, if you want to be very successful, I can tell you subject matters that you can create to sell. But if you wanna be a good artist, it's master your craft. And I'm always on artists about learning to draw and learning how to paint. When you talk about artists that are painting and drawing, I have one particular person that I've kind of said, you have these really deep concepts, but your execution is flawed. And that's coming from, you're not mastering your craft. But I know you, among your peers, are thought of as a deep thinker. And if that's your reason, you want people to look at you as a deep thinking artist, just keep doing what you're doing, but it's not well done. You know what I mean? And that's the thing that I'm working on over and over again. I'm talking to young people about it. It's like, learn your craft. And that's in anything you do. Again, master it. But that means countless hours. Like what's his name? Malcolm Gladwell talked about 10,000 hours. It's like, I know I'm probably at 50,000 hours because not only have I don't want to say I've mastered it, but I know I have. And I'll give you an example of mastering. If you watch a musician on stage performing and not paying attention to his instrument is just speaking. Her instrument is just speaking. It looks so easy. That's a master. And so when I paint, it looks like it's easy because I've mastered it. You know, and I see it all the time. I see it. That's the master at that. Or I'm working on a project right now with a book, and I'm asking these black men to tell their story. And there are people that are not writers, and they're submitting these wonderful stories that will have to be re-edited. But when the writers present their stories and their use of words, it's like, that's a master. And that's the difference. And that's what it is. Do the work. And a lot of times, especially today, in today instant society, these young people have to understand to do the work. And that's my biggest advice is do the work.
And I think what's important to understand and to know too, not doing it simply for immediate gratification. Because I think a lot of times it's the newer, younger generation wants that immediate gratification. And knowing that all money is good money, and not doing the work simply to be performative. Now, you both mentioned a little bit about collaborations and working on the national scale or larger scale than that immediate surrounding. Projects like Beyonce's Black is King and collaborations with John Legend, as well as Billy Porter as well, show how visual art can intersect with music and global storytelling. How do collaborations like these challenge or inspire your creative process? So think about your creative process and how you were brought into that overall collaboration.
You want to go first? Okay. You know what?
Okay,
I'm gonna talk national. Let me talk national again. All right. So watching Black is King and seeing those beautiful Nashes show up, it's like, oh my God, right? Or I was watching a documentary or a short with Lenny Kravitz walking through his collection, and there's a Nash. You know what I mean? It's like little things like that. It's like, yeah, like you've arrived. And you continue to arrive because your work shows up in these amazing places all the time. And what I love also when it comes to young people is, what's your voice? So if you saw that documentary and you don't know Nash, then you wouldn't recognize that's a voice from Nash. But when you see, you know that's a Nash. I think when you see a Charlie Palmer, you may know that's a Charlie Palmer. I'm not certain always. But I think that's one of the experiences. But one of the experiences for me has been it's humbling, right? Because it's an artist talking to an artist, like having a conversation with John Legend. It's humbling, right? Or having who became a friend of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, right? It's like I grew up. I was that kid in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, when the Milwaukee Bucks won their championship, and then to have Kareem in my house. And Kareem falling in love, true story, man, you probably don't know this, falling in love with a Woodruff Nash in my house, and saying, I want one of these, right? It's that kind of stuff is so real to me. And so like what it is as an artist is being in really unusual spots where you're around people that you've admired and they admire you. You know, athletes and entertainers and everything like that. But that's the bonus of it. So some people may be artists, may be saying, I'm gonna do this so I can meet these famous people. I'm doing what I do, and these famous people come to me. And that's a blessing that's humbling.
And if I can, before you start, Woodrow, just to, if you're not familiar with what we're talking about, Charlie did the cover art for John Legend's album with Big Love. Bigger Love. So that's what we're referring to. And you also illustrate children's books
Yes.
as well.
And that Billy Porter was, yeah. recent.
So his most recent work is illustration in a children's book that Billy Porter wrote. Okay, Mr. Woodrow?
Well, when you talk about music, as opposed to, three-dimensional or two-dimensional art, I don't know if, the visual artist is given the same platform as a singer or rapper, so it's a lot more difficult. Now, when I had the chance to work with Beyonce and Black is King or Lenny Kravitz, that was a humbling experience because it placed my work and my ability on the same levels. I'm on a national stage, but these people are on international stage, you know, and they're looked upon all over the world, and that opened up my work, you know, because a lot of opportunities came from that. So I think that it's a wonderful thing.
Thank you. And as you think about your overall creative process, what is the difference between creating independently versus contributing to a larger collective vision?